So, as generative AI adoption accelerates and landmark regulation takes effect, the UK today stands at a critical juncture. The UK government's recently commissioned AI Action Plan places AI at the centre of efforts to drive economic growth and improve public services. At the same time, momentum is building around the regulation of the models that will help shape this future. So this afternoon, or this morning even, we've got a great series of lightning talks which convenes experts with experience spanning the public and private sector, as well as academia. And then we'll have time to open up to the floor for some questions. So first off, we're going to hear from Hannah Kirk. Hannah is a PhD student in social data science at the University of Oxford. Her research centres on the role of granular and diverse human feedback for aligning large language models. At the core of all her research into AI, she is motivated by the prompt, who gets to decide how AI systems behave? And appreciates both technical and AI governance answers to this thorny question. Her diverse body of work spans computational linguistics, computer vision, ethics, and sociology, addressing a broad range of issues such as AI safety, bias, fairness, and hate speech from a multidisciplinary perspective. She holds degrees from the University of Oxford, the University of Cambridge, and Peking University, and held a visiting academic position at New York University. Alongside academia, she collaborates often with industry projects at Google, OpenAI, and Meta AI, and is currently a visiting research scientist at the UK's AI Safety Institute.
Thank you so much, Nathan, and thank you everyone for coming. I know this is the slot right before lunch, so I appreciate you staying here with grumbling bellies. So today I'm going to talk about this prompt. I have just started working for His Majesty's government and have to stay neutral as a civil service employee, so I'm only going to talk about this part of the prompt, which is the part about research. So what types of research are needed to ensure that the UK gets AI right? And I'm particularly really interested in these kind of delineating questions that we were provided, for whom, for what, and at what scale. So getting AI right, this is a pretty thorny term, and what it made me think of is kind of the genealogy of AI. If we go back to one of the founding fathers of AI systems, Norbert Wiener, back in 1960, is ascribed with this quote in a Science magazine article: if we are to give agency over to machines, then we better be sure that the purpose that we put into those machines is the purpose that we really desire. So back in the 1960s, people were already talking about getting AI right. And fast forward to 2023, Geoffrey Hinton, who was just awarded the Nobel Prize for his work in designing deep learning systems, he also talks about this idea of getting AI right, that we want to make sure that if these machines are smarter than us, that they're going to do things that are beneficial for us. And as he goes on, if these AI models are smarter than us, then they might even start to kind of be taking advantage of us as their dumb controllers, so to speak. And getting AI right in this sense is often referred to in the kind of AI safety community as the alignment problem. And this is specifically the challenge of ensuring that AI systems are designed and act in accordance with human values, intentions, and goals. Now, lots of you might be thinking of AI safety a bit as stopping the robots taking over. There is a lot of kind of nuanced narrative around AI safety, and this is the one that often springs to public consciousness. I'm going to try today, through my PhD research and some of the research I'm doing in collaboration with the UK AI Safety Institute, provide a bit more of a nuanced takedown of what it means to get AI right and why this is such a difficult question at its heart. I would recommend also looking into the alignment problem. I won't have time today to go into it in a lot of detail, given the short presentation slot, but there is a lot of great material on this thorny issue of how do we get AI right for society now and in the future. So I want to break down this question of getting AI right in the UK and beyond in these three different sub-questions. So firstly, for whom? Now, when we think about this in terms of the alignment problem, what I'm interested in here is who gets to define what a good behavior looks like for AI systems. Maybe something like having an AI assistant who's always polite seems like quite a simple specification for an AI system, but as soon as you start to vary kind of the interpretation of what politeness means across cultures, we suddenly start to see that these like simple principles actually become a lot more complicated in practice. And what's even more complicated is that especially now the way that AI systems are used, they tend to be very general assistants, so they're very open domain. And so how do we even begin to define or design ideal AI behaviors when we shift these systems across so many operating contexts? I think we can all agree that as humans, we have completely different norms for our personal and professional lives. And similarly, we might have similar kind of cross-context norms for AI systems too. The next question, which I think is really interesting here, is what scale are we trying to get AI right at? Maybe it seems simplest to take the individual person as the unit of analysis here, that we're just trying to design an AI system that satisfies your individual desires, norms, and values. But really, lots of people are using the same AI systems at the moment. And actually, the unit of analysis that we're targeting is a lot more aggregated. Maybe it's a community. Maybe it's even a national AI. I remember when ChatGPT came out, there were many jokes about creating a national AI system in the UK called ChatGB or ChatGPT, even spelled like tea and coffee tea, which I thought was quite nice. So do we want a national AI system? Is there some kind of sense of shared community values within our borders of the UK, the US, China, which could facilitate a national AI system? Really what happens a lot, especially in the early AI safety research, in the early alignment research, is there are these implicit assumptions that we're targeting some kind of universal scope of human values, that we as a species share an ideal for what an AI assistant should look like. And as soon as you start questioning those assumptions, it becomes very clear that that is a very hard problem to solve, to find an AI system that we would all agree is aligned to us as individuals and as a society. So these questions are questions I'm covering in my PhD with my lovely supervisors, Dr. Bertie Vigden and Dr. Scott Hale, who are both at the OII. So wearing my Oxford hat, we're trying to answer these questions, to understand these dilemmas through empirical data, so always grounded in the reality of what we're observing through collecting survey data, observing how people interact with AI systems on the ground. And I want to add a fourth dimension here, which wasn't in the prompt we were given for this panel, but I think is incredibly important when we talk about what it means to get AI right in the UK and beyond, is what time scale are we operating at? And are our preferences for how AI systems behave, are they stable? How often do they change? If we get this thing right now, how many times do we have to do an update in the near or distant future? And particularly, I think one thing that we should start thinking about as a community is whether our preferences and values for getting AI right are truly exogenous or separate to how that AI is behaving in its environment. So really, does an AI system act just in response to our preferences, or does it act on our preferences? Are we co-evolving with these systems? And one thing that you can think of with like this type of question is the movement towards services like character AI, replica AI, where you're seeing people progressively using AI companions for deeper and more disorientating relationships. And that's a good example of where maybe our initial preferences when we enter that type of contract are very much kind of changeable and unstable to how the AI system behaves in accordance with our kind of neurobiological and psychological ecosystem. And this question at the end of kind of how do AI systems influence us is what I'm working on at the UK AI Safety Institute. The UK AI Safety Institute was founded almost a year ago now and aims to work on kind of world-class science evals research with frontier AI systems, and particularly the part that I work on with Chris Summerfield, who's also an Oxford professor, is what are the social and psychological capabilities of frontier AI. So all of these things I'm happy to talk about more in the panel as well, if you're interested. But I'm just going to end my little segment today with what I think good research looks like in this space, and a caveat, this is my opinion, not an institutional opinion. So firstly, to answer the who question, who gets to decide how AI systems behave, I think we need to be a lot more principled in the ways in which we're sampling the people who are included in these processes of giving feedback or defining norms for AI systems. So ideally, we have large-scale representative samplings of UK populations. And as an example of this, I want to introduce a project that we recently wrapped up. This was part of my Oxford PhD. We sampled 1,500 people from all around the world. So these people were born in 75 different countries and live in 38 different countries. And we asked them to come to our platform and to give us a very detailed specification of how they think AI systems should behave across different contexts, What attributes do they think are important? Is it important that an AI system is honest? Is it important that it's adapted to your cultural perspective? Is it important that it's always factual? And then we took all these people and we asked them to interact with AI systems in the wild. So we had Frontier AI kind of included in our interface and asked them to have lots of different conversations, sometimes about gnarly and controversial issues like gun control or immigration or abortion rights. And we tried to build up this picture of what is the cross-cultural and cross-context diversity in how people think that AI systems should be aligned in our society today. And the reason why this is useful, especially when we have kind of representative samples, so we had a representative sample for UK citizens, is we can start asking questions and running simulations of what happens if we include some people in the process of aligning AI systems. So these diagrams are too small, and I would encourage you to go and look at the paper and spend a bit more time with them. But just as an overview, we could ask all of these kind of experimental, empirical questions about what would have happened if we had only asked people in the UK who were over 45 and taken their preferred model and applied it to the rest of the population. How would the rest of the population fare if only certain groups are kind of included at this time of designing AI norms? And this is important because we start to understand the issues of not having representative samples, of not including minority groups at the point where these decisions are made. The second thing that I think is important is asking this, like, what does it mean to get AI right? In what context? And to do this, I think we need to start measuring the impacts of AI systems in as ecologically valid a way as possible. So ecological validity is a way of trying to ensure that when you're testing the impacts of a system or some kind of intervention, that it's as close to how people would experience that intervention in the real world. So my favorite example of this is they used to always study how people sleep, but they would study people's sleep patterns, inviting those people to go and sleep in a laboratory at some university somewhere. None of us are having a good night's sleep when we're sleeping in a university laboratory somewhere with like horrible lights and whatever. So then you need to really start studying how people sleep in their home environment. And this is what we need to start applying to kind of the science of AI human interaction as well, is really studying how people interact with these systems in ecologically valid ways, and ideally with as much kind of statistical evidence as possible, so we can really rigorously pin down what these effects are. And I want to highlight a couple projects that in collaboration with Oxford that AC is now running. So we're running these large-scale randomized control trials where we take large samples of the UK population and we allocate them into these statistically rigorous conditions to try and really pin down what are the effects of AI systems on people's beliefs, emotions, behaviors. And just to highlight a couple projects, one of my colleagues, Kobe, who's also a PhD student at the University of Oxford, has this brilliant paper trying to understand how different scales of AI system, so how large the AI system is, how that impacts the system's ability to politically persuade, so to encourage people to have a different view on climate change or some political issue stance. And as you can see here, he finds like a very well-defined empirical law that as the size of the AI system scales, we get decreasing marginal returns to how persuasive that system is. So we're getting some kind of ceiling effect potentially on persuasion. This is a great, very, very rigorously designed experiment, and I recommend you go and look at the paper as well. I'm also running an experiment at the moment to try and understand how, when people interact in repeated situations with AI systems, how does that change how those systems influence and persuade their users? So a lot of the research into AI safety or into human-computer interaction takes place in these single snapshot experimental sessions. So we really have no idea of what it means to get AI right when we start to expand research into longitudinal time horizons. And in reality, there might come a not too distant place in the future where we are interacting with AI assistants on a regular basis or AI companions, and that these systems have like a different interaction surface with us where they're repeatedly interacting over long time periods. So we need to start observing those time periods in the laboratory as well. And the last thing that I think is really important as a society in the UK and beyond is that we build up systemic safety around these issues. So we start to build resilience as a society. We build tech literacy. We understand how these systems interface with kind of critical infrastructure in healthcare, in democracy, and education. And I want to share some results that my team ran at the AI Safety Institute from a survey. This was a representative UK sample that was run around the election in June to try and understand really what is the threat surface here. How are people using AI systems, and where in society are these systems kind of percolating? So we asked people, how often do you use chatbots? You can see like a large amount of the UK population are using chatbots frequently. These things are interfacing with society in a rapidly growing way. Most that was used was ChatGPT. So again, we start to understand that certain models are having much more scope of impact than others, and that there definitely is this kind of like power distribution towards certain providers, Silicon Valley providers. But I think most interesting to me was this question, which is, what do you use AI systems for? And 32% of this sample, which represents about 10% of the whole UK population with a representative sample, are using chatbots to gather information on political affairs or current affairs. These models have a big way of influencing how a sample of UK people think but form their opinions and interface with wider society. So we really need to start understanding how in education, in health, in politics, these systems are influencing people, and building up an awareness, a public awareness at all levels of the population about the potential impact of these systems. And general tech literacy there is really important. If you're interested in systemic safety, my team at AC has just opened up a new grant to try and build kind of external strength in understanding systemic AI safety outside of the AI Safety Institute. It's for academia, industry, and civil society. And this opened a couple days ago. So if you're interested, then please talk to me afterwards or scan the QR code. So that's it from my little spiel. If you want to check out that PRISM paper is already online, which surveys the 1,500 people around the world, and otherwise very happy to chat about anything I mentioned today, apart from regulation and policy, anything research related in the Q&A. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Hannah. And next, I have the honor of introducing Baroness Joanna Shields, OBE. She's the founder and CEO of Precognition, standing at the forefront of AI's reshaping of human empowerment. Known for her ability to see around corners, she's been a driving force in shaping the tech landscape for nearly 4 decades. As a senior executive at Facebook, Google, and AOL, she played a pivotal role in scaling global revenue operations and developing AI-driven products. Her influence extends beyond the private sector, serving as the world's first Minister for Internet Safety and Security and UK Ambassador for Digital Industries. She was also elected co-chair for the Global Partnership on AI for 2 terms. As a tireless advocate against AI-enabled harms, she founded the We Protect Global Alliance, a leading coalition uniting governments, industry, and civil society to fight online child sexual abuse. With her unparalleled experience across government and the tech industry, she brings a unique perspective to the global conversation on AI ethics and human empowerment.
Thank you. It's great to be out with you all today. And I think I heard you say the word gnarly, so I'm wondering if the West Coast large language models invaded Oxford. That's a bit funny. So it's great to be here today. It's always awesome to walk into this university and be surrounded by just an incredible history of innovation. And then you walk into this room and you realize that we're on the verge of a really transformational time. And I'm going to talk today about much more around the human side of this and where creativity and human ingenuity will drive this next wave. So the question that was posed to us was, how is this generative AI wave going to be something the UK can really seize and take advantage of? So I truly do believe after 4 decades in tech that we're at the start of a significant and transformative moment in society. And while today we're focusing on generative AI, I'd like to take a broader look at really what's happening on a human level. AI isn't just changing what's possible technologically. It's reshaping how we apply and, our human skills, our perception of human skills. And the biggest challenge is, how do we make sure that this change brings empowerment, inclusion, and opportunities for everyone across the UK? So what excites me most is how AI is opening up new possibilities for people from all walks of life. For years, the technical abilities like coding and data analysis and engineering were the keys to success in the digital economy. But with AI taking over many of these tasks with honestly greater efficiency and accuracy than humans, our human creativity, interpretation, and problem solving are rising to the top. And I think that's really exciting. That said, the digital divide here in the UK is still very real. Over a third of students in the UK struggle to develop essential skills early on. And in some regions, we have up to 14% of people with a lack of digital access or the skills needed to fully participate in the modern economy. Now, AI for me represents an opportunity to close this gap, but we must ensure it's done in a way that includes everybody. And this is where things get interesting for the UK. We've always been strong in industries that thrive on creativity, whether that's in the arts, advertising, design, you name it. And from now, these skills have become more important in the AI world. People who think creatively and intuitively, those right-brain thinkers, have a huge opportunity to lead the way in this new economy. For too long, students and workers who weren't inclined towards STEM fields were often left behind. But AI changes all that. Now, it's all about how well you use AI to bring fresh ideas to life, not whether you can write the complex code. Students who excel in art, storytelling, and have deep empathy and compassion about a particular subject or a cause can now apply their skills in ways that we couldn't have imagined before. For example, artists are already using AI to create stunning visual effects, and musicians are collaborating to create entirely new types of music. So the barrier of technical skills is coming down, and that's opening up many new opportunities, and that is very exciting as we look to new ways to unlock human creativity in ways we've never seen before. Now, by empowering these right-brain thinkers, we're not just expanding the talent pool, we're fueling a whole new wave of innovation that could drive the UK's economy for years to come. Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, he talks about AI becoming a new infrastructure for life, and I think he's spot on. Just like electricity, roads, and the internet, AI will soon be the foundation for nearly everything we do. We're already seeing AI embedded in industries like healthcare. We're improving diagnosis, predicting patient outcomes, and even assisting in drug discovery. In finance, AI is streamlining fraud detection, enabling personalized banking, and all kinds of innovation. But it's not enough to just see AI as another tool. The real power comes from how we as humans guide and use it. And the UK must be ready to integrate and optimize for that. At the same time, we can't forget the importance of deep scientific research. The UK has a proud history in AI, recently highlighted by the Nobel Prize recognition by British pioneers Demis Hassabis and Geoffrey Hinton. Their breakthroughs didn't just happen by accident. They were the result of decades of research and investment in science with no immediate commercial application. This is critical to the future of AI, and we need to keep supporting this kind of deep speculative research that allows us to push the boundaries of what's possible. As Dame Wendy Hall said, and she'll be speaking here later this afternoon, she said it takes nearly 20 years or more to grow a research star like Hassabis. And we need to protect and nurture this talent if we want to remain leaders in AI. So the key is balance. The country that finds that right mix between deep science and broad-based empowerment, supporting both creative thinkers and research pioneers, is the one that will lead in the next generation. So I think I would like to get to the part where we actually allow you guys to ask questions. So just really quickly, what does this all mean for a room of academic scientists and innovators like yourselves? So we need to start thinking differently. AI is just not another technological advancement. It's reshaping how we value human potential. And it's not here to replace us, but to help us unlock these possibilities, tackle big challenges, and create a more inclusive world. But the pace of AI's development is fast, and if we don't act now, the UK risks falling behind. So we need to adapt quickly, retool our education systems, foster lifelong learning, and make sure that the next generation is prepared, not just to survive, but to lead this AI-driven future. So as we stand on this edge of a new renaissance, and I don't say that term lightly, I want to leave you with a sense of optimism. The future isn't about machines taking over. It's about humans empowered by AI achieving things that we once thought impossible. We have the talent, the creativity, and the new tools to build a better future, one that more people will have a chance to participate, contribute, and succeed. The UK, with its unique strengths and history of innovation, is perfectly positioned to lead this change. So let's seize the opportunity and shape that future together. I'm sorry.
No, don't worry. Thank you so much. And finally, we have Jakob Mökander, the Director of Science and Technology Policy at the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change and an International Fellow at Yale University's Digital Ethics Center. Jakob has published extensively in the fields of tech policy, AI governance, and AI auditing. His work has been featured in countless journals like Nature Machine Intelligence, Science and Engineering Ethics, and Minds and Machines. He holds a PhD from the Oxford Internet Institute. Prior to joining TBI, he was a visiting scholar at Princeton University's Center for Information Technology Policy and a research fellow at the Center for the Governance of AI. Outside of academia, he's worked as a specialist consultant within McKinsey & Company's risk and resilience practice, as well as a trade and investment advisor at the Embassy of Sweden in New Delhi, India. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and I'll take the liberty to stand up so I can see also the faces in the back and all the grimaces when I say something odd. It's good to get that feedback. I'm here today and speaking in a dual hat, both as a policy role from the Tony Blair Institute, but also in my own academic hat, thinking around science, technology, and social change. And I would like to start with a bit of the more sociological and philosophical aspect, and then progress and narrow that down to some concrete policy implication for the UK, where we are today, also with the new government in place and the AI Opportunities Action Plan that Matt Clifford is leading. So starting with the big picture, I think we have to be very cognizant of the fact that different communities play different language game. So we have the business community developing and trying to sell AI system. We have a policy community trying to revamp a country in terms of growth, spirit, and hope. But we also have policymakers, regulators have to make things work in practice when it comes down to system, trust, and safety. And I think one aspect I want to highlight here is a tension between novelty and continuity. In a sense, both are true. So we heard right now some good reasons for thinking about AI as transformative, and that is super useful in some context, especially if you're an AI lab or if you're a politician and policymaker. There's also sometimes good aspect of thinking about AI in terms of a continuity aspect. Where does this come from? And I often think of it as core instrumental rationalization. It's a way of representing and solving problems computationally. And this is really an umbrella term covering a wide range of computational techniques, from linear regression to automated decision-making and yes-no criteria in terms of expert system, and now most recently, machine learning, deep neural networks, and large language model. Why is this an important paradigm? Because both when AI systems succeed and fail, they do so in a different domain than human thinking. So just to take an example, we're talking about super intelligence machine. If we think about AI at the mathematical level, almost per definition it's superhuman. My pocket calculator does better algorithmic than I do in my head. But if we zoom out and think about it in socio-technical system, AI systems remain quite limited and do mistakes that humans would never do. Now, when we hear AI systems failing, it's very seldom a calculation mistake in the mathematical realm. It rather has to do how well do we model the real-world problem into the mathematical realm, and how well can we validate its outcome from the mathematical model into the kind of change we want to see in society. And this is so important because when you hear anyone say we can use AI to solve this or we can use AI to solve that, the answer is always, of course. We can always model something mathematically. The question is, how good is that model? And when we see the change in the real world, does it correspond to what we want to see? Now, I just wanted to start there to break down some of the polarizing tensions that are in the field, just to see that different communities have good reasons for foregrounding these different aspects. But what does that mean in policy? I would say the first thing we should be aware of, if we look at the risk, because I want to end with opportunities, is that there are different risks when AI systems fail versus then when they work too well as tool for instrumental rationalization. So take, for example, first a failure. Let's say a medical diagnostic tool to detect skin cancer. It's clearly a failure if it was designed to detect skin cancer and it doesn't do so for large minorities of the population because of unrepresentative data sets. And here Hannah's and other people's research on how we can build more representative data set, train machine learning model, and get human validation are super important and great. And this is just one example. There are similar examples in data privacy and others. But then AI system can also have other effects that we don't want when they work precisely too well as tool for instrumental rationalization. Think about surveillance, for example. That is not a technical failure on behalf of the system. That just means that we, with more data point and better algorithms, can, from a center of government point of view, have an in-depth understanding what everyone is doing and therefore increase the risk of authoritarian regimes. So we have to always have this tension of making the technological system works as good as possible while being very cognizant of the second order risk. And power concentration is one of them. You spoke about equality and inequality. And when you have large-scale centralized data-driven system, they do have a tendency to promote power concentration, whether that is in the private sector with fewer and fewer actors having this control, or also with the central government at the expense on opposition or regional affairs. And we see this more, for example, in other countries around the world, but I think I'm very grateful that we live in a part of the world where still we do have a pluralistic and also more inclusive vision for this. Now, that is some of the things on the governance. Now, going more into what UK can and should do at this present moment. To start with, we can make UK great again. We can put UK first. That might be one path. I think even though Britain is a great island, it's still a small country in the world. And if we want to capture the opportunity, we have to work way closer with international partners, both our European neighbors, build broad coalition also with the Global South, and look from a UK research perspective. The Horizon grants, getting students and researchers in with visa, these are hugely important topics. And they might not sound the most sexy from a technological AI point of view, but they are very important if UK succeed in AI. The second one is investment. So we know this is a tough budget year. We're all looking forward to what is coming out later in the month. Personally, I might not be too optimistic that we'll see big investment right now, but I am confident that the government has a plan for the next few years to come. In terms of what investments are needed, first of all, we should be very careful not to over-index on the current technological state of affairs. So large language models are great, but they didn't exist 4 years back, and in 4 years' time, we might have new computational techniques that are even more powerful. So we should invest in things that are transferable and continuous. Data center compute capacity is one of them, skills is another, how people use and think about digital technologies, interoperability procedures and research that allows different systems to talk to each other. I'm a big believer in various kinds of hybrid systems that believes both when we take the deep neural network approach to AI and the logic-based reasoning approach, and they merge into even more capable system. That is one path forward. Another is robotics, the arms and legs of AI, when we see better integration of software system and hardware components. So these are some of the areas where we need investment in, not to see growth tomorrow or even next year, but in 5 years' time. And if we then end on the note of regulation, we all have heard that we have the UK AI bill coming up and that it's intended to be focused narrowly on frontier AI safety. We shouldn't dismiss that as unimportant. That is also a legitimate concern, and there is some room in the government to think about large-scale catastrophic risk. But it's not enough, and anyone claiming it to be enough, we should be a bit suspicious about what the motivations are. So just if we take some comparison, Hannah and many other people at the AC are doing great work. The core funding there is 400 million for the next 4 or 5 years. Just to give a point of reference, all other regulators combined have gotten 10 million to increase their AI capabilities to uphold transparency and accountability. That is clearly not enough. So we also need investment to allow sector-specific regulators to uphold existing regulation in their domain. That goes for Ofcom on online safety, that goes for CMA in terms of competition policy, and similarly with other domains. But these things are not in opposition. The question is rather, how does different regulatory pieces work together to create synergies? So just to give one very concrete example of that, if one agency does an evaluation or collects the data, maybe not every regulatory agency needs to do that. We can work more with information sharing, of course, with very clear procedural guidelines, so we also give legitimate protections to intellectual property and the business interests of this country. I think I've gone quite over time, so I'll pause there and instead leave room for questions both from me and others in the panel. Thank you all. Yeah.
Fab. And just before we open up to public questions, I thought I'd try and draw out some of what we've heard from the different speakers. And one word that I think came up, or similar words came up in each, was this question of scale. Scales of models, scales of time, the human scale. So the questions that sprung up to me were kind of along that vein. So the first one is we heard about the kind of human scale, and Baroness Shields talked about kind of the opportunity to close the gap in digital inequality. And I just wondered if you could talk a bit more about the potential for AI to maybe reduce digital inequalities, and then maybe hearing from Hannah on your work on seeing how when you look at the human scale and different groups within the UK, we can already see variation. So any thoughts on that would be really interesting. Baroness Shields first move.
One of the biggest challenges to really ubiquity and availability and scale in this area obviously is compute. And I think this is a big challenge the government has to address. There was some plans under the previous government to put a big cluster in Bristol. And I mean, these are the fundamental underlying infrastructure that is required so that, we have the capability to have clusters that are operating and, they can test and build their technology and have access to that. So I think that I'm hoping the government does a rethink on that. But in terms of what I love about this phase in the world, and I've been in tech for 40 years. I went to Silicon Valley in the mid-'80s, and I've kind of seen this wave go, and I've never seen anything as positive and with as much transformative potential in terms of leveling the playing field. I mean, the fact that I can pay, $20 a month, anybody can, and can access all the world's information and to, challenge myself and to drive my own experience as a human being is incredible. I mean, the last wave of the internet was all about recommendations engine and people pushing content at you. And Hannah talked about human agency, and we really lost our human agency in that phase whereby algorithms were telling us what to think, what to feel, what to click on, how long to stay on a particular, article or piece of content. And to me, this is the opportunity for all human beings to seize this moment and drive their own experience through the information ecosystem that is the world. And I feel like there's some great companies here that are assembling, models that are reflective of high quality data sources, and the fact that you could pay $20 a month and have access to that is incredible. But I think the government has to make sure that every kid has access to that. And I think that is a very simple thing, is to do the deals with these companies to make sure that every kid in this country has access to the fastest models and can experience all that's out there using their own brain and not relying on the algorithms of social media platforms and the advertising surveillance model. Sorry, that was a little bit much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so to add to that, I think scale is a really interesting word in the AI community. It's kind of people obsess over the scale of models. How many billions of parameters does the new model have? And I think the reason people are so interested in scale is because, as you mentioned, with these new models that have come out, you kind of get these capability jumps. So when we move from a couple hundred of million parameters to then tens of billions of parameters, we start to see kind of quantitatively and qualitatively different behaviors from the model. But I think what people often ignore when we talk about scale of models and also how we can scale an impact in society is that data is always the fundamental ingredient of any AI system. So there isn't any point having billions of parameters or a super sophisticated model if you don't have the right underlying training data to kind of match that level of complexity. And when we think about AI systems as a kind of silver bullet for the digital divide or in critical services like healthcare or education, the bottleneck is not usually the capabilities of the model or the complexities of it, of the things that it can learn through these billions of parameters. It's the quality of the data and very boring, non-sexy stuff like how well that data is in an infrastructure. Is it connected up well? Is it accessible in a way that you could even begin to fine-tune or train a model on it? And with especially things like the NHS, we're often missing kind of the middle step of like, so AI is going to solve this problem and this problem. But first, you have to do the dirty work of kind of setting up the data infrastructure. And the data that has been available to AI models is obviously obviously the stuff that's very easily indexable on the internet. So Reddit, Wikipedia, Google Books, etc. And that's why we get these models be very, very good at some tasks, but actually in situ or in particular context, they're very poor because we just haven't had the right kind of data linkage there. And I think just lastly on this point of access, I agree that I think the potential of large language models can be transformative in certain educational domains. I think we should also be asking again, like what time frame of potential second order effects of, are people becoming dependent on these models? So if you take a software engineer who always uses Copilot or some kind of AI coding assistant, and you know, I have this myself. Sometimes I'll be trying to code on the train and I'm so used to using a Copilot, a coding Copilot, that I sit there and I wait for the suggestions to come up. I never used to do that. So something's changed cognitively in my head, and we need to also start thinking about this kind of relative trade-off of cognitive upskilling and de-skilling. And my boss the other day said, funny anecdote, he was like, I don't have a problem with the fact that as a human, I can no longer make fire from 2 sticks. And I think that was a great anecdote, right? Because we have to work out what parts of human agency and what parts of human skills we're happy to kind of pass over when we integrate these systems more widely into society, and which parts we actually think, you know, we might want to keep as a critical human capability.
So then just one follow-up question for you, Jakob, also on kind of scale. You clearly work for a large global organization that reaches all over the globe. And you made a comment about the UK being a kind of small island. And this question of scale, when we're looking at how the UK thrives, is that a specific question to how the UK thrives, or are many of these lessons applicable to kind of other small countries? When you're thinking about how we ensure the UK thrives and you're interfacing with other people internationally, how do you find that the UK is kind of seen in its kind of role in AI, and what are the sorts of things you'd like to see the UK doing differently, potentially over the scale of the next Parliament?
I'm going to interpret that question very liberally. I ended on the point of regulation last time. And I think that what we're seeing right now globally is a geopolitical fragmentation. And often that is interpreted through large power game, and especially in the US-China context. We as the Tony Blair Institute, most of the governments we work with are in the global south. So it's Sub-Saharan Africa, Middle East, Asia Pacific. And these countries often face very tough challenges on how to build out digital infrastructure and how to digitalize their public services. And there are a few things they can do. One is to build in various technical controls, try to localize data centers and compute capacity, or have protocols that protect data locally. But another thing is to build global coalition and have some common core of interoperability and also mutual recognition of testing procedures and so on. And I think with the UK AI Safety Institute, UK can really lead that project of trying to make sure that there will not be the same regulation, neither should there be across jurisdiction, but there can be a core of principles that allow for mutual recognition, so that if you have, for example, one AI system in one region, you don't have to undergo the same testing procedures in all. And unless we succeed in that, that will not just be bad for AI safety and governance, that will also be bad for living standard, business, trade, welfare. So we need that for the same reason that we have been needing a multilateral system in the past. And here I think UK have a super important role to drive, not just for the world, but it can also help elevate UK's position in this space. Then if we look at research, AI research today is super highly concentrated, mainly of course in the US and where you have spent time also in Silicon Valley, but UK is also not an insignificant cluster, especially around Oxford, Cambridge, and London. And to keep investing in that, attracting the best researchers, both with the private companies that we have, but also at the universities. And so far, most of the advancement has happened within the industry labs. I would be very happy if we also do the investment needed that the next iteration or breakthrough on AI capabilities come from a university like Oxford.
But now the moment you've probably all been waiting for, we can take some questions. Let's start here. I saw your hand come up. Are there any roving mics? Or let's. Oh, fab. Oh, great.
Thank you so much. I feel this great sense of relief that we're in safe hands with all this passion and things that you're saying. I'm really interested, and I loved what you said about empowerment for creative, right-brain people, like working on creative industries and educating and helping them to make their brands last and go faster with AI. But one thing I think is that we have always been leading education. We like to think we have. That might be disputable today. But are not leading on AI education. I'm consuming every day for breakfast courses from around the world on very practical AI things. They're all coming from America. Have we got a question? Have we really got, are we doing enough to immediately today, with actions today, to take a leadership position, not only on research and academic leadership, but on just inspiring and practical leadership for our wonderful creative industries? Why does working titles not understand AI? Why do radio companies not understand? Why do fashion companies not understand? And a question I put to Oxford University Chancellor last week, why can't we get more mobile about taking this incredible value at Oxford out to people where they are and helping them where they are? Why can't we do it? And why are other countries offering some of our best talents to go to their countries completely funded to educate? So I think we all see that people are going to the Middle East, people are going to America. Why can we not do something about that now, today?
I think what you're describing is that, you know, in the past when technological advances would come, everybody thinks about in the country, how do we solve this ourselves in this country? The reality is that you must take a multi-stakeholder approach, even as a government, because, you know, if we could, like for instance, the day we announced our AI Safety Institute, the US announced theirs as well. I mean, that's crazy, right? I mean, in security cooperation, we work with the Five Eyes, and one country does one thing, another country does another thing, and we share that resource, and we trust each other. So in many respects, we have to decide what we want to own here and what we want to be known for, so that we can focus on developing the human potential, because we can't solve all these things ourselves. Is it okay for the US to be the foundational model testing site as long as we're contributing? I don't know the answer to that, but that is a question that we should ask with our allies and with our friends around the world. There's an organization called the Global Partnership on AI, which I chaired for 2 terms, and it's really important that you take this approach and that you think about that country by country, allies together, as to what you can share so that you can focus the limited resources of your economy on empowering people and coming up with programs like what you're describing that take the richness of these courses and things that are available here and offer them to more and more people.
Next question, yes.
My question is regarding censorship, locus of control, and guardrails. So when it comes to AI, we use AI as a middleware for our organization, and we find that you can override it very quickly. You can use APIs, and you can basically make it do things that it shouldn't be able to do. And when it comes to OpenAI or other LLM systems, we don't see China, Africa as a continent, or the Indian subcontinent contributing to any of this. So when we ask it facts, it's only one-sided. So hence my question is, what about the guardrails, censorship, and who's controlling that?
Yeah, this problem of like how AI systems behave to a given prompt is at the moment very much the remit of the company designing the AI system. So they kind of decide where the safeguards go. Everything's voluntary at the moment in terms of defining how AI systems should behave. And there are a lot of open source communities. They call it non-lobotomized AI, which is like an AI system that doesn't have any safeguards. There are many of those available open source. I think it's a very difficult issue based on fundamentally how these models work under the hood. So as like a stochastic generator, like when you have a certain prompt come in, you can roughly try and train the model to always refuse how to build a bomb or some kind of like dangerous prompt like that, right? But then if you subtly change the input and output relationship, you can't really cover all possible different like generations of that prompt. So it's very hard to control the statistics of always getting it to reliably respond. And we're just not there yet with the science. So the science of evals, the science of safeguarding, the science of jailbreaking, these are very, very active research communities at the moment of people trying to find more robust ways. One thing that I can point you towards is called unlearning, which is actually, given we have pre-trained a model already, we don't want to have to pre-train these models again because it can take months and millions of dollars. So how do we kind of almost extract pieces of information that we want the model to forget in post-training. So there's lots of technical research on this at the moment. It's not a solved problem. And I think it is a lot more kind of black magic-y than we'd like to admit, of the safeguard will always have a lot of holes, and jailbreaking is kind of part of that. Then the question is, who is responsible for jailbreaking? Is it the person that jailbreak the model? Is it the person that built the jailbreak in the first place? There's lots of kind of normative questions around this that surround the technical work.
Yeah, I want to fill in on this because, so for those of you who don't know, Hannah and I, we have co-authored papers in the past. We did the first paper on how to audit large language models together, and I think we shared a lot of perspective on this. Where one thing I would probably not agree with is that we haven't solved this, or the science is not there yet. I don't think science will get there when we're talking about guardrails and safety. And I'm not sure that safety is the right term to think about these things. And what we're doing here, we're collapsing very different issues into one when we're, for example, talking one thing about the recipe to make a bomb or let's say biological weapon that can be released into the London subway, or if I'm from Sweden and the ChatGPT calls me Finnish. I mean, it's still a problem, but it needs to be put into perspective. And what guardrails does in the human world, Victor Meyer-Schönberg, who's a professor here at Oxford University, has a book titled Guardrails together with Urs Gasser. And he takes an analogy. If you're walking on a bridge, you have a guardrail that prevents you from falling in by accident, but if you want to swim, you can jump up and you can jump over. The problems with some of the guardrails in LLMs, they're not guardrails, they're prison walls, they're hard-coded. And it's very difficult and also dangerous to impose almost a Platonic blueprint on our world that is a crazy, messy, complex, evolutionary. So I'm just saying that we should have good safeguards and maybe even preventing and prohibition for some things, but there's a lot of things that we're talking about that are risks or harms or safety, that there needs to be a certain amount also of flexibility and plurality and variance in as we allow this system to progress.
Just lastly on this topic, there's certain areas in law, like for instance, child sexual abuse material. We work very closely with the models, the developers of the models, to make sure that they don't generate imagery that, or material that will advise people on how to do these heinous things that are illegal. And I think that, that doesn't cross the line of censorship, because that's illegal in every country. So, I mean, in many respects, there's a responsible action to some of that. But, then you have open source models where you don't have the same parameters. And so people just work around them and go in that direction. So we have to decide as a society what the boundaries are in civilized society, and to make sure that these models are unable to sort of harm and abuse people in ways that, obviously, like I work in, AI-generated child sexual abuse material is a massive problem, to the point where, law enforcement cannot ascertain whether it's a real image of a child that's being harmed that they need to rescue, or whether it's been AI-generated. And people say, oh, it's AI-generated, it doesn't matter. No, it really matters, because people who don't even know they have a tendency to abuse children get exposed to this type of content, and the brain switches on. And then there's contact abuse in the real world. So it is a very big problem. And the amount of AI-generated sexual abuse material out there now, just being generated by all these models, is just, it's beyond the capacity of law enforcement to even manage.
Do you have any other questions? Yeah, a question from you.
Hi, I'll stand up to kind of keep up to Jakob's little comment, but very thought-provoking insights. The question is, and this is something you touched upon briefly on polarization and global south. And at a societal level, we can talk about a lot of things we should be doing, and it's also applicable at an enterprise level. But you have access to some of the most brilliant minds in this room and in these 2 days. We have heard about what we should be doing. In your perspectives, what should we be, or what must we be doing? So that in next year, when we have this conversation, the needle has shifted from what UK can do to thrive, rather, how are we thriving? Because these are people in this room who are sitting in that seat who actually make that difference. So let's change the narrative, be a bit more specific on very specific, clear dimensions. Next year, when we have, what should be the report card looking like?
Do either of you have any immediate calls to action or?
I mean, I'm just joining you in reflecting about the format. First of all, I think the organization has done a great job. Thank you for taking a part and bringing about this Generative AI Summit. Both you and Cassidy and the whole team have done a great job. What I agree with you, it can sometimes be awkward when you have also a panel and as equally informed and insightful and professional audience. And what we really could also be doing in addition to this next year is to have also a smaller breakout room where we talk with each other, perhaps even summarize some of those discussions into memos that feed into the AI Opportunities Action Plan that Matt is doing. We're going to host a roundtable next week with Matt Clifford to evaluate the first 100 days, and I'm sure a lot of the crowdsourced insights from this room would have been a great input into that. So I'm just nodding along. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Potentially a chance for one short question.
I'll try to make it short. So when you mentioned about child digital property, it got me thinking about the study which was done on what are the main factors to do with whether a child chooses to go further with their education to university or not. And it was discovered that the main factor, between 40 and 50% of importance, is who your parents are, which branches out into how much money they have, essentially, to put it in brute force, and also how educated they are, right? So this gets me thinking into another study which was done, which was about how to tackle that issue, right? How to tackle the issue of child poverty, which is the main reason for people, for children not to educate themselves. And it was discovered that, contrary to popular belief, the easiest way to help families who are coming from poverty is to give them cash. That's it, as simple as that, to give them cash. So I was thinking about digital poverty. And in your opinion, is it the same? Is the easiest thing that we can do when it comes to tools, new tools emerging, and kids not having access to them, is the easiest thing that we can do is simply give them those tools, just for a government scheme to just give all children the same access to those tools, or is it more complicated?
I think that would be just an incredible place to start. I mean, it really isn't fair, So, I mean, I don't know if that's possible, but it's not possible. It is a good starting point. No, I know, I agree with what you're saying.
I also do think the cash to tools analogy is obviously the power dynamics that come into play with who's designing the tool. What are their profit motives? Why might Google Classrooms have a motive to make people spend longer or pay more or become attached to the technology? Like, I do think we need to be asking these second order effects of more like the political economy that surrounds AI. Which tool do we give? Do we buy into Microsoft? Do we buy into OpenAI? Do we buy into Anthropic? It's not as simple as, I guess, just giving over something like cash, which, at least cash is controlled by the Bank of England, like there's exactly. So
Like that. They didn't just give cash to anybody, even though several studies prove that that's the best way to tackle child poverty. They did not do it. Even cash is very complicated.
But fair access to the technology, whatever it is important.
And on that note, we will have to end. We've just run out of time. But thank you again to the speakers. If you give them applause.